right. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this May 22nd school committee meeting. Pursuant to Chapter 20 Acts of 2023, this meeting of the school committee will be conducted via hybrid participation. We will post an audio recording, audio-video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of these proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting on the City of Somerville website and local cable access government channels. Oh, do we do that first? Before? Okay. I will call a moment of silence and then a salute to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And now will you call the roll, please?
Dr. Ackman.
Here.
Mayor Ballantyne. Ms. Patone.
Present.
Dr. Phillips.
Here.
Ms. Dion.
Here.
Ms. Barish.
Here.
President Ewan-Campen. Ms. Krepshin.
Present.
Mr. Green.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Now I will call on our interpreters to introduce themselves in no particular order. Spanish interpreter.
Muy buenas noches, mi nombre es Erika García, seré su intérprete de español para esta noche. Para escuchar esta reunión en español, haga un clic en el globo que se encuentra en la parte de abajo de su pantalla y seleccione español. Good evening, my name is Erika Garcia. I will be your Spanish interpreter for tonight. To listen to this meeting in Spanish, click the globe at the bottom of your screen and select Spanish. Thank you.
Alô, boa
Português?
noite. O meu nome é Ben. Eu vou ser o seu intérprete de português nessa noite. Para você ouvir essa reunião virtual hoje, você pode ver lá embaixo da sua pantalha e selecione, entendeu? Nesse globo, selecione o seu idioma, que é português, e você escutará tudo em português. Good evening, my name is Ben Cruz. I will be your Portuguese interpreter for this evening.
Thank you. And Haitian Creole.
Bonsoir tout le monde. Moi relè Gina Miranda, c'est moi-même qui interprète à Soya. Si vous avez en créole haïtien, s'il vous plaît, ou cliquer yon petit monde qui bleu, là fini ou attendez en créole haïtien. Good evening. My name is Gina Miranda. I'll be your Haitian Creole interpreter for tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, and that brings us to our first item of business, which is awards and citations. We have two students here with us this evening to receive the Massachusetts Association of School Superintendent Award. So I will read a description first, and then I'll invite the student to come up to the podium if you'd wish to say a few words, and I have an award to give you. So first, we have Veed Patel, valedictorian. Veed has been in the most demanding program at Somerville High School. Since freshman year, he has been enrolled in AP classes, sharing classrooms with juniors and seniors students. Up until today, Veed has taken all of the highest levels of math and science classes offered by Somerville High School. He is one of the most committed, responsible, and independent students. Even through the challenges of COVID-19, he was able to get the best of the situation. He put a lot of effort into organizing his classmates to develop Java projects for his class. His leadership has grown through the years, reflected in his grades and hard work. Outside school, he likes to keep himself busy by combining one of his enormous passions, tennis, with various academic activities, such as being a student at Momentum Coding and AI Summer Camp. He has also worked as a math tutor here in SHS. We are thrilled to share with you that Veed Patel was accepted at MIT to pursue his career in physics. Congratulations. If you want to just you could, here, right behind you. Yeah. All right, that brings us to Elizabeth Churchill, the salutatorian. It is a great pleasure to announce Elizabeth Churchill as salutatorian. Ellie has taken the highest level of academic rigor available at Somerville High School, including 10 AP classes. Ellie has earned a 4.82 GPA. She is known for her contributions in class discussions and thoughtful effort into her projects and assignments. She has an intellectual curiosity and motivation to succeed. Ellie is a leader among her peers and a member of the National Honor Society. Her hard work does not stop at her academics. Ellie is a dedicated ballerina, spending countless hours after school training and performing. She attends the Jose Mateo Ballet Theater and is a member of the YouthWorks Dance Performance Group. She has participated in intensive dance programs across the U.S. She plans to continue her love of dance while attending college and hopes to dance professionally in the future. Ellie is an active member of the Somerville community, playing violin in the orchestra, being a member of the Teen Health Alliance, and working part-time as a hostess. Ellie will be attending Stanford University in the fall, where she will enter in undeclared and to explore her diverse interests. Congratulations. And with that, we're just going to recess for a few minutes so that people can congratulate them one-on-one, and then we'll reconvene in just a few minutes. right, I am calling us back to order. We're still having some technical difficulties, but if you are listening via Zoom, the live stream isn't working, but the cable is, and there will be a recording after the meeting if you want to watch it after. So just so you all know if you're listening on Zoom. All right, with that, we have our student rep, correct, Ms. Santiago?
Yes.
Okay, Ana Sofia, the floor is yours. We can't hear you. Hold on just a minute, we're trying to solve the problem. Okay, you should be all set.
Should I start over? I'll just start. Okay. The multicultural fair.
If you want to speak a little louder.
My mic might not be working very well. I'll try again. But the multicultural fair is this Friday, which hasn't happened in the past few years because of the mods and the pandemic. So it's very exciting. It's coming back. There's going to be performances and then stands with information and just general food and artifacts. Student morale has been kind of low recently just from general like burnout and exhaustion. So people are really looking forward to the different events happening this week and the modified schedules. And that's all.
Great, thank you. Are there any questions for our student rep? Ms. Patone.
Thank you, through you, Chair Krepchen. Did she say anything before the multicultural fair? Because I didn't hear any of that. Can you ask her that?
Anna, can you still hear us? Did you say something before the multicultural fair? Because if so, we didn't hear you.
Yeah, the seniors' last day was on Friday, and there's a class day for them on June 2nd, where they're gonna just be sort of presenting what they're doing post high school.
Great, thank you for repeating that for us. Are there any other questions? Ms. Barish.
I don't know if Ana Sofia can answer this, but I'm curious about whether the multicultural fair is open to the public or if it's just for high school students.
I'm not sure.
Anna, do you know?
I don't know, no.
Okay, thanks.
Ms. Patone?
Through you, Chair Krepchen. In the past, it's just the students, the staff, school committee members were invited to come and visit in the past, so I'm assuming that's still okay now.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right. Thank you, Ana Sofia. Next on the agenda is approval of minutes. I will entertain a motion.
I move to approve the minutes of the April 3rd, 2023 meeting. Can I do them both? And the April 24th, 2023 meeting.
I have a motion by Ms. Dion, seconded by Dr. Phillips. Is there any discussion? Seeing none. Whoever votes yay? How do you all vote? Yay? Aye. Sorry, aye. Are there any nays? Seeing none, motion carries. All right, that brings us to public comment. I have Emily Hickey and then Alexander Epstein. Emily Hickey, the floor is yours.
My name is... Okay. All right, we good? Take two? Okay. My name is Emily Hickey, and I live at 64 Marshall Street in Ward 4. My son is a third grader at the Argenziano, and I'm here, again, to speak about the Common Planning Time proposal that has been discussed to date. During the pandemic, a member of this committee said something that has really stuck with me. You can't program your way out of a bad policy. My concern is that this proposal in its current form does just that. The program in its current form makes cuts to learning time that, depending on how you slice it, add up to between 2 and 5 full school days. The claim is that increased efficiency in teacher training will more than make up the difference, but I can't find evidence to back up that claim. Let me be clear. I support opportunities for official structured collaboration across grades, schools, and the district as a whole. I think that's a great idea. What I can't support is cuts to learning time for a population that has already lost out on so much of the most precious educational resource, time in classrooms with trained professional teachers. I am invested in Somerville being a district of choice for educators. I don't want that choice to come at the expense of children's time with those high-quality educators. These opportunities for collaboration and planning must not result in a net loss of learning time, full stop. Lengthen the other school days by 10 minutes, add a couple days to the school year, whatever it takes to get this to net zero. Learning time is sufficiently precious that this year, a working snack was implemented. Students can have snack, but they are expected to be working during it. This replaces a brief recess they took last year, but the need for students to be with teachers is so significant that a break for students to eat and move had to be cut. However, this proposal claims that there are hours of learning time that can be cut with no ill effects. So from my perspective, we are faced with a bad policy in its current form and claims that those losses will be programmed away, and I find myself skeptical. In addition, in discussions with other parents and caregivers, few of them are aware of this proposal being on the table. Parents need to be made aware of these trade-offs before any kind of planning can be done in earnest, or this district will be once again rightfully criticized for a lack of communication and transparency. Something this important shouldn't be communicated through the parent playground grapevine. My ask is that this proposal not be approved in its current form, and instead be integrated into a broader discussion about the length and structure of the school day to better meet the needs of everyone in this learning community, teachers, parents, and most importantly, students. Thank you.
And next we have Alexander Epstein, who I believe is on Zoom. Alex, the floor is yours.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. My name is Alex Epstein, and I live at 1 Tremont Place in Ward 2, and I also have a child at Argenziano. We all want our kids to be in the best possible learning environment, and Common Planning Time would facilitate that. And we all want to figure out how to fit in the Common Planning Time. I believe that taking learning time away to fit Common Planning Time in is counterproductive, especially right now as our kids struggle to catch back up from pandemic learning loss. They can't afford to lose any learning time, even if that time would be very valuable elsewhere. If anything, they need more learning time than they have now. I'm skeptical of the extra 5 minutes of instruction time in the morning. I imagine that there are some classes that, for various reasons, maybe the classroom is on the first floor near the door, maybe they have few kids who need help, maybe it's nice out and there's no winter gear to deal with. In those classrooms, it might be possible to start instructional time 5 minutes earlier. I would guess, knowing our teachers, that the teachers in that situation, any teachers who can start teaching earlier, are already doing so. For the other classrooms, my concern is that starting learning time earlier isn't really feasible. So I don't see that we'll be getting back any learning time by changing the time of instruction time in the morning. I strongly do support Common Planning Time, and I firmly believe that the best way to do it is to extend the school day, as other districts have done. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes public comment. And then if there are no objections, we're going to take things out of order and take the Common Planning Time discussion and vote now. So with that, Dr. Curley, do we have some framing discussion first?
Thank you, Chair. So I just want to give a couple quick comments, and then we have a group here that will be representing the Joint Committee that has done work on this proposal over the last year. Just a reminder, this is an effort that came out of our last contract with the SEU. It is a joint effort of district leadership, of our educators. The Common Planning Time members that have worked on this are Dr. Boston Davis, Rami Bridge, president of the SEU, Caitlin Donaldson, a kindergarten teacher at the Winter Hill, Chris Glynn, who is our Director of Educator Development and came out of the Healy, Courtney Goslin, the principal of the Winter Hill, Alex Hershey, who is a coach at the East Somerville and the Argenziano, and Kathy Kumar, a paraprofessional at the Capuano, Kathleen Seward, who was the former principal at the West and is now the coordinator for social studies, for the district social studies curriculum, Deshawn Simmons, a social studies teacher at the Kennedy, and Glenda Soto, the Argenziano principal. Here today are 4 folks that are going to represent that body and can answer any questions in discussing this. It is our belief that this proposal really strengthens and professionalizes the ability of our educators to collaborate and to work across grades and really make sure that that our schools are meeting the high expectations that we want for them. And so I would like to invite Karen Woods, Caitlin Donaldson, Chris Glynn, Rami Bridge to come join and offer a few framing remarks and answer any questions about the joint proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Curley. I do have some prepared remarks, and I was going to introduce everyone by name as well, but thank you for doing that. This has been a culmination of a lot of really great collaborative work from a variety of folks. Our joint study team was composed of central office people, school leaders, lead classroom educators, and paraprofessionals, and I wanted to give them a well-earned public thank you for all their hard work, so thank you. And like Assistant Superintendent Boston Davis mentioned when we were last presenting here, the team really had a fun time together throughout the process. And the focus on improving teaching and learning conditions was always in our hearts as we met, discussed, and planned over those several months. I just wanted to reiterate a few key points that I think summarizes what the spirit of our group came to. We believe this proposal will greatly improve the overall quality of learning time in our pre-K to 8 schools. We think it will produce improved student academic outcomes on a variety of measures. We believe it will foster more opportunities for educator leadership. We think it will enhance the collaborative spirit of our school environments. It will improve the educational experiences of our MLE learners and our students with special education services, and will create a more equitable student experience for the kids in our city, regardless of which K-8 school they attend. Lastly, I want to point out that I don't think this proposal is pitting teacher planning time against student learning time. I think those are interwoven, and I think this proposal is going to enhance both of those things to the great benefit of our students. So we're really grateful that the SEU vote was overwhelmingly in favor of the Joint Study Team's recommendation when they voted last week. And I've been honored to be part of this, and again, I'm thrilled about the possibilities and how transformative we think this proposal will be, and that's all I have to say, so thank you. Anybody else want to?
Okay, I guess I'll go next. The only thing that I wanted to add to Dr. Curley's framing in the beginning there was that everybody on both sides of the table understood the importance of common planning time when we were in negotiations. There were different ideas about how to fit that into the school day, and I just wanted to reiterate that this framework of doing it on early release Wednesday was your proposal. That is a district proposal, not a union proposal. And then what was agreed to was a joint study to create that proposal, to make it a plan. And so that was the task that was set out for the joint study, and what we did was create a plan for your proposal. So I just wanted to make sure that that was like super clear in case anybody didn't know that fact or couldn't remember back that far. So I thought that was important to add. And I also wanted to just emphasize again what Chris just said as well about that being a false dichotomy between what is student learning time and what is like educator time. These things are like unbelievably connected, and it's not one or the other. These things go together. So yeah.
Hi, I'm Caitlin Donaldson again. Yay, kindergarten teacher. I just really was so excited the fact that the SU overwhelmingly voted yes for this. This is something that I've been doing on my own outside of my paid time. And I'm speaking from someone who has coming back from maternity leave last year, took a year off before that. So basically, I haven't been in the classroom for 2.5 years. I was here when I was teaching during the pandemic, and then I taught remotely, and then I was off. So coming back this year, I have a brand new para. There's a brand new curriculum. I have a 2-year-old son at home, and balancing all these things has been a little bit crazy. I wish more than anything right now I had this time to meet with my paraprofessional on a regular basis, to meet with my co-teachers on a regular basis and say, help me, because right now I'm literally flying the plane and building at the same time, and it sometimes is going, sometimes it's flying, and sometimes it's failing, right? Having this community that's able to support is gonna help teachers come back. It's hard. It's hard to balance it all, and we need to support each other. We need to support ourselves, and if you want teachers to stay, help us help each other. Help us help each other be better teachers, want the best for our kids. That's all we want to do, is do the best. We go home and we reflect on it all of the time. We know what we're doing well and what we're doing well, and the more that we can spend time doing it in a collaborative way is only going to be the best for all of us. So please really just consider that as well.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Karen Woods. I'm the Chief Personnel Officer for the district. I'm also a former teacher in the district. I'm also a parent of a first grader in the district. And I overwhelmingly support this proposal and all the work that the joint study, really thinking about who is sitting at the table. We had teachers, we had paraprofessionals, we had principals, we had district leaders working together to come up with this proposal. And I think some of the strengths to remember about the proposal are that having this time where paraprofessionals, educators, specialists, special education teachers, service providers, SLPs, everyone is involved in these meetings, because everyone is free of the responsibility in that moment of serving students. When you try to build something like this into the workday on prep periods or by offering other electives, someone's brain is somewhere else. You say, wait, we only have 30 minutes, we only have 25 minutes, I gotta go pick someone up. It doesn't work. And I do feel that educators, being an educator myself, deserves that professional time to collaborate during the day, during their workday, to come together and say, I have this problem, how can we solve this? I tried this, did this work? Let's look at the data. We just don't have that time in the schedule right now. And so I really just want to emphasize, even as a parent in the district, knowing the number of hours and the shifts, I think this is a very well thought out, very well deserving proposal that I hope we see get implemented. Thank you.
Okay, with that, I will open it up to questions or comments from members. Dr. Ackman.
Thank you, through the chair, to the team. Thank you again for your hard work on this. I have a series of questions, so I will start and we'll go as needed. In public comment, we heard someone mention about 5 minutes of instructional time being taken away in the morning. I thought that was off the table, and as I read through, I didn't see it, but I was curious about if that's built into the proposal or not, because yes, it is. Taking away an additional 5 minutes of free time for students?
So the schedule changes in the contract, changes the academic start time from 8:25 to 8:20, which is 5 minutes.
Of student free time that's taken away from them in the mornings in order to implement this.
So the schedule currently says that students report to school at 8:10 and instruction begins at 8:25. Now it will say students report at 8:10, instruction begins at 8:20.
Thank you.
Yep.
Other questions, comments? Ms. Dion, and then Dr. Phillips.
Yeah, I thank you all so much. As a teacher myself, like, I can vouch, it really, and it's hard because it's like there are, different districts have tried to come up with different ways to do it. And like, I understand people's sentiment about, like maybe we should extend the school day, and maybe that is a broader conversation that needs to be had at some point. But just, especially given the difficult year for budgeting that it's been, I just want to like highlight the fact that extending the school day would cost a lot of money, because that means paying all however many hundred educators accordingly for their time. So that's just not that means we shouldn't do it, but that's just something to think about. Like, because I feel like I've heard people say, say, oh, well, we should just extend the school day, as if it's like a casual thing that could just be done kind of with a snap of the fingers. And I feel like that's just something I wanted to call attention to for people to think about.
This is a procedural question, I think, through you probably to Dr. Curley, maybe Ms. Woods. What power does the school committee have right now? Like, are we looking for a vote up or down? Can we amend this? Can we call on the district to do something in addition to this? What's our power here?
Thank you, through you, Chair. I believe that right now this would be a yes or no, an up or down vote, because it has already been ratified by the SEU, and so any changes to that, this would be my assumption, right? And
it's a yes or no vote.
Yeah, that's it, because any changes to that, it's already been ratified as is, as you see it. Yes, please.
So, the answer to that question also, because I was asked that a whole bunch as we were going through our ratification process, is what happens if it doesn't pass? And the answer is nothing. The status quo stays the status quo. There are no changes to the contract, and then there is no common planning time.
Thank you. I had Ms. Patone and then Dr. Ackman.
Thank you, through you, Chair Krepchen. I think I have some process points as a school committee member. I was not aware that this was something that was dictated from the district to use half-day Wednesdays when they went into the joint work. But I also know that could have turned into any solution. It didn't necessarily have to be this solution using those. I also didn't realize, and maybe I missed something, that this was going for ratification, and it had already been done. So I feel like I'm missing the boat from a process standpoint, where if I knew this was going to ratification in a previous meeting, I would have made some really clear statements, and I probably would have made a motion to the school committee to make changes, because I've made it pretty clear that as much as I am incredibly excited about common planning time, incredibly supportive for common planning time, I am not comfortable supporting something that takes this many hours out of the school year. So there was the process questions, and then I have a little more that I want to share afterwards.
Dr. Curley, did you want to respond to the process question? Okay, Mr. Green?
Thank you.
Mr. Green, if you're speaking, we can't hear you just yet.
Can you hear me now? Hello?
Oh, now we can hear you.
Great. So, since this first came to us, almost 2 months ago now, I've been, thinking about 3% learning, the 3% lost learning time. And I, like many people, viscerally hate the idea of losing any learning time. It, on a visceral primal level, sets me off. But when I think about it any other way, if I think about all of all of my educators, all of my district leadership, past, present, and future superintendents, all supporting it. And I think about, like, if they had come to us and said, hey, we're going to invest 3% of the day in literally any proposal they said would improve learning for students, we wouldn't even think about it. We would say, of course you should do it. If you think it's right, you should do it. And then when I think about the things we know we need to do as a district. Earlier this year, Ms. Soto came to us and mentioned our need to, and she's not wrong, completely revamp our ELA curriculum. We've been talking for 2 years now about the need to revamp our math curriculum. Those are not things we can just wave our hands and say, hey, here's a new curriculum, we're going to do it. In order to do those things, educators, district leadership, not within and between schools, are going to have to work together on how to implement a new equitable curriculum. And I say this as someone who has long supported a longer school day, and would love to find the money and the resources to make that happen. Ms. Dion is correct, that's going to be pricey for a number of reasons. Probably can't be done without state help. It probably also needs to be done on a regional, like more than like 5 attendants here and there, which I would love to talk to the union about in a future contract. But it's not going to be something that we can just wave our hand and do. So when I look at that visceral response to any lost learning time is wrong, I find myself in practice saying that I'm not willing to invest in improving instruction unless I have a perfect, no trade-off option, which simply isn't on the table in the next year, 2 or 3. So, like, if I want to see our curriculum improve for the students who are most vulnerable, at some level, I have to trust the 1,000-odd people in Somerville Public Schools we hire to do this work who tell me that this is the way to do it. And so I'm going to swallow that visceral primal response, which I share with many parents, and trust that if my superintendents, my district leadership, my educators tell me this is the best available option right now, we should take this option right now, and that doesn't preclude the work I think we should be doing to figure out how we extend school day in general, not for learning time, frankly, but for recess, for art, for the things that we squeeze out because of the SE's learning time requirements. But I'll be voting yes on this.
Thank you. Ms. Patone?
Through you, Chair Krepchen, I just had the follow-up about the procedural question about why, unless I missed the boat and I missed the information that this was going to SEU and then coming to us for ratification. Obviously puts us as a school committee in a pretty awkward situation as opposed to being able to address and move forward before an SEU ratification.
So I can speak to this somewhat.
Yeah, through the chair. So this is the typical the way in which the process runs. That and Ms. Woods can speak to the legalities of it, but we ask the SEU to ratify before we bring it before the body.
Sure. I will also say that we inquired with legal counsel about the proper process, and this was it.
Ms. Patone?
But I don't think the school committee was notified that it was going for ratification. That's what I'm struggling with. If I knew that that was happening, I would have taken action earlier. Obviously, we've been all very busy with many things, with budget, with dealing with the Winter Hill building, and for me, this kind of got backburnered. If I had known this was going to be up for ratification and that was going to have the SEU vote, I would have maybe taken a different action prior, and that's why I'm frustrated.
Ms. Woods?
Through you, Chair. So I understand the procedural question here. That being said, there is no action that really the school committee could have taken on the proposal because this was the joint study that was put together came through negotiations last year, and the language of the joint study reads, a joint study between the district and the SEU will develop a plan to restructure early release Wednesdays to enable additional and consistent common planning time. The joint study will report their recommendations by a certain date, and it is that recommendation of the joint study that goes forward to vote.
Thank you for the clarification.
Thank you. I believe I had Dr. Ackman next.
Thank you. I guess this is also a process question that is a follow-up on Ms. Patone's. Should this, my understanding is the intent is for this to go into effect July 1 of '24, not of '23, so it would not be for this upcoming academic year. So should it get voted down tonight, are there opportunities for us to come back to this during the next academic year of school committee meetings in order to find something that's mutually agreeable among school committee and the union?
Yeah, Dr. Curley.
Through you, Chair. So one of the intents, I think the primary intent with the delayed implementation was to address a concern about the impact on out-of-school time and other coverage that the district wants to make sure we're bringing in and bridging the gap. We also, I think, to the comment made, want to make sure that this is a conversation we're having. We're letting folks know about the reason of the change, and we're preparing over the next year to line up the partnerships that we've been talking about to ensure that students come off the wait list with community schools, that we bring other district providers into place to make sure that, especially on those half-day Wednesdays, that there's support throughout a school time available. So that was the primary reason we thought that we wanted to have a bit of time for this to take effect. We're also reaching the absolute end of the of the school committee year, and so we want to have a chance for this to be able to launch successfully, not next school year, but the following.
Dr. Phillips.
Through you, Chair, I'm hearing a lot of concern about the parent trade-offs between common planning time and instructional time, and parent concerns about care in general. And I guess I'm wondering, to me, I don't see any reason why we couldn't table this. We couldn't direct the district to come back to us with a plan by whatever date feels reasonable to the district for how they're going to get care to the kids who need it, or how our kids who aren't on grade level are going to not lose instructional time because of giving teachers common planning time. That feels reasonable to me, but is it reasonable to all of you?
Mr. Green?
I actually had taken my hand down, but I do have something to say because I want to respond to that particular point, actually. So on the issue of care, like, it is almost certainly true that families that depend on SPS, that makes Wednesdays even harder than it currently is. But there are a lot of families, myself included, who can't rely on SPS for childcare because our schedules are such that it is too impractical to make the kind of commitments you need to make to use community schools as your childcare solution. And when I talk to those families, I talk to some of those families in that boat, people who do shift work or what have you, but families whose schedules and lifestyles don't make community schools a good option. Many of them responded positively to the stability of knowing that every Wednesday will be the same. So, like, I think on the care issue, it cuts both ways. There are definitely families who will need a year to adjust, and we should do everything we can to help those families. But there are families who will respond positively to the stability of the schedule. I'm not even going to remember, is this week a half day or not, when they're making their weekly plans.
Mr. Mauser?
Through you, Chair. Just a couple quick points. I think, Mr. Green, said it correctly in terms of when we think about the out-of-school time piece, as you've heard from us, we're really focused on that cross-sector work. So it's not just some rural public schools that are providing, after-school care. It's a conjunction with the city and the community. This gives us time to further plan and strengthen that. I can't sit here right now and say this is exactly what we're going to do, but that's why we're holding this off for an entire year so educators can plan. So we can plan with parents to figure out what we're providing and what we're offering parents in terms of whether it's community schools, whether it's BAM, whether it's WOW, whether it's another initiative that we have, so there are options for students as we move forward with this.
I do think the consistency of the half-day Wednesdays will be important for a lot of people. I have Ms. Patone and then Dr. Ackman.
Thank you, Chair Krepchen. I come to my current kind of decision with a really heavy heart, because I know how hard everyone worked on this, and I don't take lightly the idea as a school committee member to disagree or disregard a recommendation made by administrators and educators. So I've given a great deal of thought to this proposal, and much as I would want to have common planning time in our district, I can in good conscience support this proposal, which introduces common planning time at the expense of time that our students are in our schools. You know, I looked at the proposal and I did my own math, and basically there's nearly 24 hours taken from the school year. That's up to almost 4 days of school that our students will no longer be attending. So many in the Commonwealth and nationally are discussing the need for longer school days, especially in urban ed, and I urge us to consider other solutions to create the space necessary for common planning time. There are ways to provide common planning time that don't require losing student hours. I know there's the idea of additional electives, but I also know that's complicated, and that's during the school day, so I heard Ms. Woods, and I understand that. But other districts have done things like a limited expansion to school days. For example, adding 20 minutes to the teacher day on an early release day. So it's a very targeted addition to time to ameliorate some of the loss of time. I expect any changes to the teacher day or additional electives or whatever solution would add to the district budget, and I feel really disappointed that I haven't had the opportunity to consider these investments and advocate for them, because I would come in and say if we needed X dollars to get the 20 minutes or 30 minutes, I would be standing in front of the mayor's office, knocking on her door saying, give us this is what we need. But that was never given to us as an option. And maybe we didn't frame the problem in that way. And thank you for lighting the mood for me. Historically, once time is taken out of the schedule, it is incredibly difficult to restore it. So I used recess and lunch last time as an example. It wasn't that I was trying to say we should have more recess and not common planning time. No one, not a single educator I've ever spoken to or a parent or caregiver thinks that 15 minutes of lunch and 15 minutes of recess are okay. They are not okay. And at some point, someone made that decision and we have never gone back. So this is what my hesitation is. We're institutionalizing our schedule, that we as school committee are the people who have the authority over the schedule on the school day. So I really want my colleagues to think incredibly seriously about taking time out of the school day and the school year. I know that in Arlington, the administrators added common planning time to the school day with this whole complex schedule, and part of their goal was to add to the school day, so that if we had the common planning time during the day, but they tried to negotiate and they could not, so they never recouped that time, so still their students are in a deficit. I think the joint study team made an excellent case for the benefits of common planning time. I cannot at all say it's been all positive, and I really appreciate it, and you've created such a thoughtful structure that it sustains individual teacher planning time, created additional collaboration time for teaching teams, grades across schools, across districts. I'm so thankful, and that's why it kind of breaks my heart to sit here and say I have to vote no to this. That's why I'm disappointed that I didn't realize that it was getting ratified, so of course that puts me as a school committee member in an awkward situation to have to deny that. But I don't think as a school committee member that it's necessary to be in the position of choosing between common planning time or student time in school. There has to be a solution that allows for both. So thank you so much, but I cannot support this proposal.
Dr. Curley.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. I just want to push a little bit on the time question, because obviously that is a big factor here. It's the district's position, I think the joint planning position, that with that shift in the morning, the reduction in quote-unquote learning lost time is 10 hours, not the, so it's 1.1%, not the 3 or 4% that has been cited by different members tonight. I just want to point that out. I think we're obviously talking about something that's like an extremely difficult, constrained learning time. There's so much that we want to put into a school day, and that is the tension that I think is in place here. It is our position that this is a net positive, that 1.1% loss is made up by all of the things that Ms. Donaldson referenced for her ability to teach with her other educators. And so that's ultimately the argument here, that the force multiplier of the use of that time is worth it. I also just want to put a kind of a very vague back of the envelope number on this question of like, can we just do everything? It's about $1.5 million to like add that 10 hours back onto the school day, if my quick calculations are correct. So in a budget, again, where we're down to like, can we restore one more position onto this budget right now? And we're talking about, you know, a $70,000 position, like the context of this, of just like, we can just expand the school day and do that within the overall budget framework is not particularly realistic in my mind. So that is where I just want to push a little bit against that idea that like, well, maybe we can just have it all.
Ms. Woods?
Thank you, through you, Chair. Just a couple additional points. You know, Dr. Curley made the clarification about the time that we're talking about approximately 10 hours of instructional time. But to the point that it is incredibly difficult to change a schedule, I understand and agree with that, and I want to make clear that right now the 13 half-day Wednesdays that are built into the schedule from 12 to 2:30 allow for absolutely no collaborative time, no time driven by district leaders, no time that the principal can dictate what happens in those hours. It is all individual educator time as written in the contract. That has been something incredibly difficult to change. Educators need time. They need time to plan, they need time to contact families, they need time to do work, and that has been their time. So this proposal takes that time and shifts it to a collaborative model. And to get that collaborative time that's not solely, quote unquote, and I don't like to use this word, but for this purpose, owned by the educator, is an enormous, enormous benefit. So I want to share that and make that clear, that right now those 13 half-day Wednesdays are no collaborative time. So we're going, this is a huge shift, I think, for the benefit of all. The other piece I just want to mention is, you know, I hear, can we add, can we lengthen the school day? I heard Ms. Donaldson talk about retention, right? And the answer can't always be add for teachers. There's a lot that goes into every day. There's a lot that goes into the after school hours. Absolutely no teacher I know works from 8 a.m. to 2:30. There is no teacher that does that. So thinking about the amount of work that educators take home, do on their own time, do on the weekends, I think if we're trying to retain educators and we want high quality learning experiences for our kids, educators need to be able to collaborate during their workday. And so I don't think that the shift of 10 hours of instructional time over the course of a year is going to have such a significant impact to not vote for this.
I also just want to point out that I think there's some confusion or tension between the hours of the school day and the hours on learning. So I just want to make sure people at home sort of get that there's a difference in terms of the hours of the school day versus the time on learning. I have Dr. Ackman, and then Mr. Green, and then Ms. Dion. Dr. Ackman?
Thank you, through the chair. So I have heard so far from Dr. Curley, from Mr. Green, from the committee that is presented to us, including Ms. Woods right now, that the subtraction of time, I'm trying to use the least inflammatory words possible, has a benefit in the quality of instruction. I'm here for it. I've read the research. Okay, with that in mind, what are the metrics that we are permitted to hold you accountable to show us that it is worth this altered calendar that take some number of hours of learning away from students.
Someone want to take that?
As Dr. Boston Davis mentioned the last time around, we would expect an MCAS score to be up across the board. We're also going to be implementing new measurement tool, iDecide, this next year. A formative assessment tool that I think will give us some metrics sort of outcomes in that way. I'm sure we could point to, this many common unit plans that have been planned in a year, this many common assessments that have been delivered, this many, there'd be loads of sort of quantitative things that we could probably point out over next year as we would do the implementation year next year, the planning year next year. So I think we would see lots of outcomes that would support what we described.
Ms.
Ask a
Woods?
follow-up?
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
So I appreciate it, but what I'm hearing is retention and teacher well-being is part of this. I would love to hear what are the metrics for that? Like, are there qualitative as well as quantitative? I've heard anecdotally many, many times, the benefit that our students, our teachers will receive is worth what is being taken away. I have not heard, we will know this by, and what I struggle with is being confident that these hours can be reduced. I'm not hearing how we will know that this is working, and ideally for me, what we're going to do if we're not getting those results.
Ms. Woods?
Thank you. So I think a couple of points here. I think it's a great question. We should always ask, how will we know, right? How will we know that this is having an impact or that it's effective? And so I think that there are several things, many that Chris just mentioned, that we could look at in regards to student outcomes. Knowing that this was kind of one piece of a much larger puzzle to have this return to focus on academics and student outcomes, thinking about what formative assessment tools are we using to know if students are making progress. Now we actually would have a vehicle to look at that data and make instructional decisions. These things all kind of go together as a plan in order to kind of quote unquote get back on track in terms of the student outcome and achievement piece. So any student achievement data, whether it's MCAS, other formative standardized assessments or homegrown assessments can be used. I think in terms of the impact on culture, both staff and student, we have multiple ways that we do measure that and that we could measure over time. We have an annual conditions for learning survey and that process is the survey data itself, which is quantitative, but then there's a follow-up piece to that, which has like a qualitative, you develop questions from the data to dig into the root causes of why you're seeing changes. And so that I would expect would also be some of the pieces that we could point to say what kind of an impact this has had on either educators or students and their families as that survey is triangulated in that way.
Thank you. Mr. Bridge, did you want to comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to go back to a couple of things that we talked about earlier. So one is, I've heard a lot of people talk about extending the school day and people talking about educators and the demands on them. And I just want to emphasize also students and demands on them. As someone who has taught for a long time, students at the end of the day are not the same as students at the beginning of the day. And adding instructional time beyond that, I would argue is diminishing marginal returns. And as people are sitting here going, I'm curious about these 5 minutes at the beginning of the day, I will say I'm curious about those minutes at the end of the day as well. So that's number one. Number two, that is beyond the scope of this joint study. This joint study did not have the purview to talk about extending the school day. I would argue that if school committee is interested in extending the school day, that would be a great thing to bring in negotiations in 2 years. And that is a different conversation, to my mind, than the conversation we're having here today, which is about common planning time. And so I know that is going to bleed into other conversations, and I think it's really productive to think about this just as this thing, and then there are going to be things that change as a result of this, and that'll be something to come up in negotiations next time. That is something that we talked about with our own members who asked a million follow-up questions about what this time is going to look like, and the answer is we don't know exactly what it's going to look like because we haven't gone through the implementation phase next year yet. And so there are going to be a lot of questions about what this looks like. And the question that, that I pose to members and I would pose to you is, do you have faith in your administrators to then go do the thing that you asked them to go do? I hope the answer is yes.
So just to clarify and follow up on that, when I think about trying to extend the school day, I'm thinking about recess and lunch. I'm not thinking about more learning time, at least me personally.
Thank you. I'll just add then that if you wanted to add 5 minutes to lunch, that would be a lovely thing for you to take up in school committee policy, right? And so those 5 minutes in the beginning of the day bought you 5 minutes now to make everyone's lunches 5 minutes longer. So go for it. I think that everyone in schools would be really excited with a longer lunch, both students and staff.
We're getting off topic. Also, the 5 minutes in the morning wouldn't be everyone's longer 5-minute lunch, just to point that out. Pardon? Yes, I was about to call on Andre and then Ms. Dion. Mr. Green?
Thank you. Mr. Bridge stole some of my thunder. I'm going to mention the not every minute is created equally point. But I'm also going to mention, as a veteran of 1 or 2 negotiations, that I think Mr. Curley's $1.5 million budget thing is probably minimum. Is actually probably conservative, because if I were in the shoes of the union, I recognize that one of the few intangible benefits of being a teacher is that your hours are childcare compatible. So asking to change that, if I were the union, I would charge a premium. I think it's something we should investigate, and I would absolutely welcome bringing that to our next negotiations. But as Mr. Bridges pointed out, the negotiations are 2 years from now. So we're talking about no common planning time for 2 years, during which time, again, I want to repeat to people, we are talking about revamping our entire curriculum. I don't know how people expect us to actually do that, which is I think the most important thing we can do to eventually see the kind of returns on learning that we want to see, without time for teachers to work together to implement those curriculum changes. I'm reminded of conversations I had with Superintendent Skipper about rate of change and wanting to go faster, and her pointing out that there's only so much time and bandwidth the district ever has to make change. This is the first proposal I've seen in my 8 years on school committee that will improve the district's capacity and bandwidth to make change. So when I think about the things we as a district know we have to do in the coming years, it's daunting. It requires bandwidth, it requires educators buy-in, it requires time for teachers to do it. It requires all the things that this proposal buys us for the cost of 10 hours a year. And if we don't think this is worth 10 hours a year, why are we going to waste any time on it? It's frankly where I am on it. It's either worth the 10 hours or it's not. And I think it clearly is.
I had Ms. Dion next.
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly fact check something that had been said earlier. Ms. Patone, you mentioned Arlington Public Schools, and I teach there. So the time that was added during the school day, that's not common planning time. It's time to meet with the principal and go over student data. And then common planning time is on half-day Wednesdays. Wednesdays, we always students get out at 1 o'clock, and there's sometimes building meetings, sometimes common planning time. And I think it works really well. So I just wanted to clear up sounded like a misconception.
Can I follow up?
Yeah,
through you, Chair Crepton. So I spoke to an administrator in Arlington, and they consider that part of the, they might be not titled common planning time, but looking at data with your principal and teaching teams, to me, is common planning time. So maybe it's like a semantics. So for them, that's part of their whole model. They have a half-day Wednesday. They have this model where they do it during the day. They also, my understanding, and I could be wrong, is in that half-day Wednesday model, the teachers stay an extra 20 minutes. So their schedule is 20 minutes longer, and that's a contractual thing. And so I guess I have a very tangible, first of all, I want to acknowledge the things that Chair Green is saying. I hear him, the whole idea of having capacity for change, that is very compelling. But in the construct of this joint study committee, was there no authority to talk about potentially proposing adding time, at least on the half day? I'm not talking, of course I'm interested in the whole conversation around a longer school day period, but right today, I'm really only interested in about adding time to support common planning time. So I'm curious, was that even in the scope of conversation?
My understanding is that it was not in the contractual joint study. So there was, correct, yeah, Ms. Woods?
Yes, thank you. That's my understanding as well, as, you know, that was not within the purview of the joint study made up of educators and administrators. The school day is set by the school committee, so that was not within the purview. I had one other thing to add. Oh, yes, I was like, but it's related, in that I do think there's a bit of semantics here in that, you know, if we have an early release Wednesday and then also have professional development afterwards, the work can continue. It's not that, you know, it ends right at 2:45 and then something. So we have opportunities to extend the work, which is actually one of the benefits of having this on the Wednesday, on the same day that we do professional development, so that teams can actually be deep into the work together and then extend their time. So that is actually a purposeful selection.
Ms. Bichon?
Yeah, and just as the follow-up and extension, the idea was the kids stay 20 minutes longer and then the adults stay 20 minutes longer. So that 20 minutes gets back into the calendar. And so the frustration for me is not with you, it's not with administration, it's with this process that there isn't really a way to address, I guess what I would say, a more creative solution that involves money. And that's where I'm stuck on this, is that I really still feel incredibly uncomfortable with taking away. I'm not going to use the word time on learning. I was very explicit in the way I described this. This is time that kids are in school. And that is very important and very relevant. And I do know that the team put a lot of thought into time on learning. I will say that I didn't even know there was such thing as a 8:25 start time as a parent. And I've spent a lot of time in classrooms and as a volunteer. Teachers, from my perspective, start when they can, right? They give the kids space, they let the kids settle in, and they start what they can. I don't, maybe some teachers sit there and wait until 8:25 and they get started. I don't think they do, but I could be wrong. So I just feel like sometimes we're trying to massage this information to make it be the best story, which is good, but I'm really, that's what I'm sticking on, I guess, is this problem that I have, that there are ways that we could, and it just seems like this process is constraining us. And so that's my resistance to this choice, and I don't really want to wait 2 years, but it sounds like, I mean, as a school committee member, do I have any authority, or do we have any authority to do something different to deal with that component of time and money?
Dr. Phillips, you had your hand up.
Yeah, thanks, through you, Chair. I'm sitting here struggling because I want to approve this. I think it's really thoughtful. I think it's great. I don't really buy the 5 minutes, the 8:20 to 8:25, but we've talked about that, right? I really want to approve this. And yet I still want to see a little bit more before I approve it. And I want to know a couple of things, right? I've been in this district for 7 years. We have always been unable to hire enough staff for community schools or open enough classrooms for community schools. I agree with Dr. Green, or Mr. Green, I don't actually think that's the problem. What I'm more concerned about is the kids who need those 10 hours to 4 days, whatever that time is, who need that time. And we don't have any metrics in here, like, yeah, we can totally collect all this data on these metrics, but if we don't meet those metrics, this is still what's going to move forward, right? There's no accountability for those metrics built into this proposal. So what I really want to know is, right, for the kids who need it, what is the district going to do to get those 10 hours or whatever the hours are, get them that time learning, right? And there's lots of ways to do it, right? The Lawrence Miracle is all about this intensive time with great educators over a very short number of days. There's summer school, there's Saturday schools, there are all these many options. And I guess I'm wondering, I still don't see why we can't table this for a while the district figures out some options. We can talk about those options and we can decide to do them, and then we can vote on this. Maybe I'm missing something though.
Mr. Miles, did you want to respond?
Yeah, through the chair. So in terms of the thoughts around students who we think need that additional time, we will build in resources for them. It could be, for example, a lot of our after-school programs have academic components to them. For example, at Winter Hill with Soccer Without Borders, there's a literacy component, there's a team building component where all students that are participating, they're playing soccer, but they're also doing literacy skills as they play. So for us, taking that year to plan for students who need that, we feel that need that additional time through the metrics that we have, we will build in programming for them. It could be tutoring, it could be volunteer tutoring, it could be a bunch of different things, but we need to figure out, one, what the metrics we're looking for are, but we also want to make sure, and I think this is far beyond, the seats for community schools, quite honestly. I think it's a larger picture, and I'll keep saying that cross-sector work, right? Because we can tap into the community, and we can tap into the city to assist with those academic components. Why couldn't we? It doesn't mean that we have to sit a student in front of a teacher for them to learn. We have great artists in this community. Why can't somebody who likes the visual arts be taught some things around that? I think we need to be creative in what we do, but I think the idea of tabling this and then waiting for 4-6 months, it then puts us in a situation where we do not have enough time to thoughtfully plan this out. And then we're talking about notification for parents. What are parents going to do do they have to scramble to get daycare? I think we have to look at it from both sides, and I think taking a year to plan is the best thing that we can do. So we're not saying in 3 months, hey, here we go. We're implementing this and we'll figure it out as we go. We're taking a thoughtful year to plan this, looking at all of these pieces so we have answers, we have resources for students who need them.
I have Ms. Woods and then Mr. Green.
Just a quick follow-up. I have a lot of really strong feelings around this topic because I feel like we are underestimating how impactful it can be in the district. I really, truly do. And I'm thinking about the different ways, the tutoring, the springboard partnership, right? And I'm really struggling with this idea that how much we would gain from the time and the thoughtfulness that went into the planning by the joint study. This isn't a 2-month-old proposal. This is a 1.5-year-old proposal because this originally came up in negotiations where this was a proposal that the district brought forth to the SEU because we believe so strongly that this is going to have an enormous positive impact on student learning. And so I'm struggling with the conversation because to table it, I think dismisses the thoughtfulness that went into the joint study to really think about, we have plans for next year to hire some of the cross-district planning time leaders. Some of the things that came out of COVID is now we have this wonderful tool called Zoom. Wonderful. We have a tool called Zoom, but that we envision doing cross-district work where people don't need to travel. So we have cross-district teams and we want to hire those leaders so that they can start to plan what that collaboration will look like. Grade 7 across the district, right? Then we have teams of educators in schools, what that collaboration is going to look like. And without that full year of being able to plan, I don't think it will be as impactful. So I just want to reiterate again the thoughtfulness in the joint study that went into having the year to have that planning, to think through what that could look like. And then also, I will leave it at that.
I'll call on Ms. Barish because she hasn't spoken yet, and then Mr. Green. Ms. Barish?
Thank you. A lot of my colleagues have asked some of the questions that I had, and have raised some of the concerns. I was glad to hear, like Ms. Batone, I was surprised that this had already gone to the union for ratification, but I was glad to hear that the educators overwhelmingly support this proposal. I am wondering if any concerns were raised by educators about having enough time, minus these 10 hours, was there any concern that they won't have enough time to do the things they need to do? I know that teachers are already really stretched thin, so I'm just curious about whether that was raised.
You mean in terms of their own instructional time?
Right. Okay. Yep. Will they be able to meet DESI's expectations, the district's expectations, et cetera?
No. No, that was not raised as a concern. I mean, I will say the biggest concern that I heard as we went to all the meetings was around a similar concern to you about after school and what that means for their students when school ends. And again, like, I as a parent, I also think that this is going to make a predictable schedule, makes it much easier for me to find care for my children. And as someone who is going to be going back to the classroom next year, and if this is passed, I will have to figure out where my kids are going to go every Wednesday at 1. That sounds like a much easier problem to solve than where do my kids go on random Wednesdays at 12 in terms of being able to hire someone to pick them up or to take care of them. I would imagine that it would make it easier also to hire someone to work in after school if you can tell them their schedule in a clear way that like will be the schedule.
Add on to that, and actually as educators we have talked about that. I know in kindergarten in particular we have ever-growing demands of what we're doing. We're required a certain amount of literacy and a lot of math. We have social emotional curriculum, and it's hard with science curriculum. We're getting a brand new social studies curriculum next year, so how do we fit it all in? And we were talking about that. We would have a limited amount of time, but it's also thinking about what is the most important. How can we teach well? How can we teach for quality instead of quantity? How can we take those lessons and can we combine them? How can we combine our math lessons with our social studies lessons? Or how are we doing things thematically rather than doing everything separate at the same time? Why am I teaching about nonfiction and doing a unit about something else at the same time? Why am I not combining all of these things at once? So we're starting to think about these, and having time to plan that across the district makes it actually going to work. Right, so giving us that time to think about it and say, okay, like, we're gonna roll out some new curriculums. And the other thing too, like, I really do wanna go back to and talking about like the things during the day and things happening during the day. It can't happen. Like, we have a prep time. My prep time is 40 minutes. It takes me 10 minutes to get my kids down to music, and then I get there, and then I've got the one kid who's having the accident and has to change their pants, and then I get in there, and I'm like, not really thinking about what I'm actually supposed to be doing, and they're like, okay, so we're gonna talk about A&R and your data. I'm like, I'm not here. And then it sits at my table, and then I'm like, oh yeah, we should be talking about this, but I'm not. So just thinking about how we can take our time and we're working smarter and really prioritize what our curriculum is and what is our curriculum going to look like. So right, if we're getting new curriculum, how can we change it to make it be more efficient?
Mr. Mazza, and then Mr. Green.
Through the chair, and what this does is it allows everyone that Caitlin needs to be at the table to plan to be at that table. Because if everybody is not there, then there's a certain subgroup of students who are not getting the same thing. And that's what tends to happen when you do things on the fly, when you try to do things during prep time. And this allows everybody, MLE educators, special educators, paraprofessionals, service providers, specialists, who have a huge stake in what happens with students, to be at the table at the same time, so you're planning together. You're delivering instruction together based on those plans, so all subgroups of students are getting the most efficient and effective instructional practices they can get.
Mr. Green and then Ms. Parrish. Mr. Green?
Thank you. Through you to, I believe, Mr. Bridge, when you say overwhelmingly, can you give me a percentage?
Yes.
He's looking it up.
Thank you.
Sure.
Can we have the raw numbers and the percentages and the percentage?
Yes. For Unit A, 75% voted in favor, 170 votes in favor, 51 opposed, and 5 abstentions. For Unit C, 87% voted in favor, with 20 votes in favor, 2 opposed, and 1 abstention.
So I'm going to use Unit A because I don't actually remember how many members are under the unit.
It's like, as a union person, you discover that figuring out how many members you have is the $1 million question.
Right.
Because lists keep changing. I think there are roughly 550 Unit A members and roughly 120 Unit C members.
Right, so 40% turnout is about normal for a union election, so like, I feel comfortable using those numbers as a fairly good representation of where we stand. And so I am faced with a proposal that has the support of the prior superintendent who first, as Ms. Woods pointed out, first suggested it, the current interim superintendent who has watched the joint committee do its work, the incoming superintendent who sees common planning time as a necessary component of implementing curriculum change. 75% of teachers who bothered to have an opinion, I'm assuming the unanimous support of the Joint Study Committee, including principals, and there's been a lot of talk this year as a committee about listening to our staff. And I struggle to think of any issue where it is more important to listen to our staff than how they can get the best use of their time in their day. So like, if I don't trust my staff on this, either I have the wrong staff or I'm the wrong leader. Like I can't imagine in my day job having my staff say, this is our unanimity, that we would get our work done better if I was to do X. Am I being like, nah, that's not the case. So when Ms. Woods talks to me about how transformative this would be, I believe her. When the teachers talk to me about how this would help them do their day better, I believe them. I'm an expert on a lot of things. I'm an expert on a lot of things around equity, but I'm not an expert on is curriculum rollout. So like the people we pay a lot of money to say, this is what you should do, say this is what we should do. So like, I don't get where I can come off saying that my fear, which I share with my friends on the other side of this issue, is a better place to make judgment from than the overwhelming expertise of my experts. That's just where I am.
I have Mr. Bridge, then Ms. Barish, and then Ms. Patton.
Yeah, I just wanted to add also that somewhere between a fourth and a fifth of our members are at the high school, and this has no impact on them, so I don't think very many of them voted. And the other thing I was going to add is I had the honor of meeting with every single one of the superintendent candidates that came through, and every single one of them asked about the common planning time. And when they heard the plan, they were like, wow, that's a great plan. That is awesome. Without fail, every single one of them were very excited about it.
Thank you. Ms. Barish and then Ms. Patton.
Thank you. I think that answers my question, but I have a little bit of trouble hearing Mr. Green over the mic, so I just wanted to confirm that he said that incoming Superintendent Cardona, did I say the right name? Carmona, thank you, supported this plan?
Yes,
I believe that is what Mr. Green said.
Permission to say that publicly.
And then my other question is a follow-up on Dr. Ackman's question from at some point. There was some discussion about metrics for assessing how well this plan is meeting its objectives. And I think also she asked what happens if it's not meeting the objectives. And I guess I would like a little bit of clarity around that. Would that essentially come up at the next negotiations in 2 years? We would would that be our opportunity to revisit the plan and to make potential changes? I'm seeing
I mean, I think the answer is
affirmative
yes,
nod,
that
head
could be
nodding.
discussed in negotiations in 2 years.
Thank you.
Ms. Baton?
Thank you, Chair Crupton, through you. I want to be clear, none of this is about not trusting staff. I feel like in my 10-year on school committee, trusting staff has been the core of my work, listening to staff, creating relationships with staff. So I just want to point that out, that none of my objections have anything to do with trusting staff. They actually are why I'm so heartbroken about having this conversation, because I do trust and support staff, and I think I've demonstrated that in my experience on school committee. I also want to be careful about, I appreciate that Chair Green has had conversations with the incoming superintendent, but I don't want to make any assumptions. The incoming superintendent is not part of this conversation. He has not heard any of these things, so I wouldn't make a blanket statement that, you know, Dr. Carmona supports that unless it came out of his mouth in front of this body. So I just really want to be careful and genuine about that. I think the piece that I didn't get an answer on, which maybe this is what Ms. Barish spoke to, was that, you know, I'm at a loss for this time taken away from the school day, and that's what is causing all this challenge for me. And it sounds like there's nothing as a school committee member that I can do to move that forward. I am constricted by this process. I'm frustrated, and am I missing the boat somewhere? Like, can I make a motion that says, you know, I make a motion for the superintendent to figure out a way to return time to the school day and enter negotiations? What are my options? And I don't know this.
Through you, Chair. I'll try to get to that answer, but I just want to reinforce, yes, maybe what is a complicated way in which we've gotten here, but this is the structure in which we all work. So, and it's been a crazy year. There's been a lot going on. There's been a lot of change. As Ms. Woods pointed out, this came up from the district side in negotiation almost 2 years ago. We couldn't get it finalized at the table, so we worked this language into the contract that says we're going to do this work jointly. That work was unanimously approved by school committee in voting that contract, and with timelines and, excuse me, getting animated, by which we had to come present our proposal. That proposal has gone through ed programs, I believe, twice. It's now for the third time in front of regular. This is the formal legal instantiation of everything we have been presenting in ed programs and in each time we've been before the regular body. It's just now in fancy legal language that will be adjustments to the contract. And so I think that's what I will certainly own, that there may have been things that we could have better communicated in the process and in the way in which this has come about, but that's kind of the path by which we have gotten here, and we're presenting the proposal in whereas language of what we have been talking to ed programs and talking to the committee about for a year and a half. And again, it's done within this very difficult box, this box of time that can be very frustrating, where everybody wants more out of the school day, but we, you know, as I keep saying, believe this is an incredibly good use of that 10 hours of time for the committee to consider.
And I also think, to the point made earlier, negotiations, again, will be here before we know it in 2 years, and these are all things that will come up when this conversation happens again. Dr. Acton.
Thank you. Through the chair, there's a Russian proverb, this, trust but verify. I think that we show in our data-driven decisions, I would say, you know, for those who have run or who have presented SIPs, they've presented ambitious goals, some of which they're confident they won't meet, or it seems unlikely, but those are still goals. I think where I've heard this team say they believe it, and I've heard that there's data behind it. I think what would help me, and I don't know if that necessitates tabling it, is like, I want to know, like, what we can hold accountable, what we can be held accountable to by people who have expressed, that they are hesitant to take away any more learning time from students, and as such, what we as a body. And I think that I will say that is what I need. I truly do trust, but I'd like some opportunity for verification, and I'd like sort of concrete metrics, qualitative, quantitative, if it's just, even if it's like a higher number of teachers getting higher performance ratings. I trust this team, but I think that would help me feel more confident, like in what we're wrestling with. That's why I brought it up, is like, metrics matter. We are accountable at the end of the day to all of us to do right by students, and we need to be able to measure that somehow. So I think I would like to sort of see what metrics are, and I'm open to any and all of them before I'm comfortable voting on this.
Ms. Barish.
I want to add a quick follow-up and then a comment. I asked about, opportunities to make changes. Is 2 years enough time, do you think, to assess the efficacy of these changes, at least to the point where we feel like, okay, we don't need to renegotiate, or we do need to renegotiate? Does anyone have thoughts?
Ms. Woods?
Thank you, through you, Chair. I was brainstorming and thinking a little bit about something I mentioned earlier, that this is kind of one piece of a larger puzzle, right? And I always struggle with being that I come from a science background. I like controlled experiments, and life is not a controlled experiment. This is very much a social science. So it's hard to say that this, change had this effect, right? And so, I did want to share some of the other changes that we've put into place over the last few years that I think would, taken together, have this large impact that we keep referencing, that we keep saying, we have this feeling, to Dr. Ackman's point. But over the last 3 or so years, we've created the educator leadership model, right, with multiple pathways for educator leadership, one whole branch of which being curriculum, another being professional collaboration. Through the curriculum branch, the development of a curriculum development review cycle that I know we've presented at programs several times, and different subject areas have done that. But having a vehicle in order to do that work is really important, because we have heard feedback from educators that the continuous add-on stipend, extra hours is not sustainable. The creation of the district instructional leadership team that was born out of the educator leadership work is a centralized leadership team made up of representation of educators from every single school to start to, and this is only year 2 of that district instructional leadership team, but the point of that committee is to look at data, different types of data from across the district, so summative, formative, and standardized assessment data, but also attendance rates, and also student discipline, and also conditions for learning survey data, looking at that district-wide, and then informing back to the school ILTs what we're seeing as district trends in order to make district priorities for instruction, being that it's an instructional leadership team. Transitioning, like I had mentioned, to a new, or reinstituting, I should say, a formative assessment model so that we can track student progress in our elementary schools, and the investment that you all know of, because we just finished budget, of the Lynch Leadership Academy, professional development for all of our principals next year. So all of these things were thoughtfully proposed and planned together, with the hope that we would have a vehicle through which to do the work work that is required to bring all of this together. That did not exactly answer your question, Ms. Barrett, but thinking about, will a year be enough time? I don't know. There are a lot of significant changes, but I think we could certainly set some metrics, that we could bring. And I don't know that we would be able to point to any one of these changes or initiatives to say that was the magic bullet. I think if we could, we would all go into another profession, right, of sharing this out widely, if there was such a thing as the magic bullet. But I think it's been literally years of careful, thoughtful planning to come to this point.
And just to call on myself for a minute, I also keep coming back to the point someone made about teacher retention, which I think is super important in the climate that we're in right now. And if this common planning time can help with teacher retention, I think that's a real bonus to think about. I have Ms. Barish and then Ms. Baton.
Yeah, I just wanted to, just a quick comment. There were a couple of slides in the original presentation, which I don't think is in our packet tonight, but I looked back to, that do talk about what we expect to see as outcomes. Increase informative and summative assessment data. I assume that means improvement, not just increase, but both, I guess. More inclusive practices across departments, more effective data-driven instructional practices, better implementation of core curriculum, more educator leadership opportunities. And I think the challenge is in measuring those things, right? Like, I think that that's hard. I do see that we have our data expert here who's really good at measuring hard things to measure, so thank you. And I also just want to say I really appreciate, Ms. Woods, the way you explained that the investments that we are already making, while they might not depend on this for success, this is an important part of the success of those other investments. So I appreciate that you brought that together for us, because that was not a part of my understanding of the situation. So thank you.
Ms. Baton.
Thank you, Chair Kripchen, through you. A couple members, colleagues, have identified ideas of tabling. I just would encourage, if someone had something that they wanted to do or expect and to make a motion or not to do those things. I'm not necessarily saying that I want that to be done, but I just wanted to encourage my colleagues to I think we've gotten a lot of the issues and concerns out, but we need to decide if we're going to call the question or not, or if there's an alternative motion that someone wants to bring forward.
Agreed. I will entertain a motion. Dr. Phillips?
I move to approve the common planning time proposal conditional on the district providing the school committee with a plan to mitigate lost instructional time for students who need it by December 1st.
Point of order. Don't think we can do that. It's got to be a clean up or down vote, because it's a vote on the contract.
It's a vote. So it's a vote on the contract. We can't add. Yeah.
It's got to be a clean up or down vote. We can also vote separately to request the district to give us a plan, but that has to be separate from the vote on the contract.
Thank you for that clarification. Ms. Dion?
I move to approve the common planning time proposal.
Second.
I heard a second from Mr. Green. I have a proposal by Ms. Dion, seconded by Mr. Green. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, Dr. Curley, would you call the roll?
Dr. Ackman?
Yes.
Mayor Ballantyne? Ms. Patone?
No.
Dr. Phillips?
Yes.
Ms. Dion?
Yes.
Ms. Barish?
Yes.
President Ewan-Campen? Ms. Krepshin?
Yes.
Mr. Green?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Motion carries. Dr. Phillips?
Now I move to ask the district to provide a plan for mitigating lost instructional time for students who need it by December 1st.
I have a motion by Dr. Phillips. Is there a second? Ms. Patone?
Can you repeat the motion?
I move that we ask the district to provide a plan to mitigate lost instructional time for students who need it by December 1st.
Ms. Patone?
Second that.
Okay, I have a motion by Dr. Phillips, seconded by Ms. Patone. Is there any discussion? Anyone from the district want to respond in any way? Yes, Dr. Ackman.
Through the chair, are there parameters around your expectations, or it's just, I mean, because presumably the plan could be implementing common planning time will help. I mean, I'm not joking though, like, that's not a joke. Like, it's a very viable possibility. So, like, we could vote on it and that's what it could be. So if we're going to put teeth behind it, can you?
What would be your suggestion? Because I'm talking about mitigating lost instructional time. To me, that's pretty clear, right? We're losing 10 hours, we're mitigating it in some way, but maybe you have ideas.
Nope. Sorry, through the chair, I do not have additional ideas.
Is there any further discussion on the motion on the table? If there are none, yes, Ms. Patone?
Thank you, through your chair, Corruption. First, I want to acknowledge, I appreciate Dr. Phillips' creativity and trying to get her hands around what is being missed, or what kind of is the fallout, for lack of a better word, although we're going to have a lot of follow-up of positivity as this goes through, and I'm the first one to acknowledge that. I think actually it's really interesting, and I'm going to support it.
Dr. Phillips, did you want to say more?
No, I think I can add, the intent is not just to do common planning time, and I'm happy to add that as a friendly amendment to the motion. But I think that it's clear to the district that that's not my intent.
Okay, Ms. Patone?
Through you, Chair Corruption, I get the intent. The idea is just having a point of accountability for all of us. So the school committee, as well as administration, to say we're going to follow up on this conversation and not just let it, disappear. So that's why I want to support it.
All right. We have a motion by Dr. Phillips, seconded by Ms. Patone. Could you just repeat the exact wording?
Excuse me, I was trying to raise my hand, but I don't know if...
Oh, sorry, Mr. Green. Yeah.
So, actually, I want to echo Dr. Ackman's point. Like, in theory, we believe, that's why we're doing this, that in common instruction time does make up for loss of instructional learning time. And further, that the reason we're implementing this in 2024 is already to give the district a year to create an implementation plan. I guess I'm trying to figure out, other than trying to send a statement to the community that we hear the fear, which is valid, and we do hear the fear, what is the concrete thing we're trying to do here?
Sorry, Dr. Phillips.
So my read of the research, it's not all like a one-to-one, right? Like an hour spent on common planning time is not an hour gained in instructional and better use of instructional time in terms of outcomes, number one. So I don't think it's a one-to-one. I think even if it were a one-to-one, right, our kids are already, half a year to a year behind on average from where they would have been pre-pandemic. We haven't made that up. We've made some up, but not all of it. So we still have a gap to close. And I think, right, our kids we're already trying to plan better use of out-of-school time, better use of resources, and this, in some ways, just gives us a deadline for saying, here, very clearly, is our plan 100%, and, right, it includes these 10 hours that we have lost from the instructional time. Here's what we're going to do for the kids who need it the most. at least, I would say it's at least equivalent to what they have lost, if not more, right? Because again, we're not where we want to be academically. And again, this is just one piece of the puzzle. I absolutely get that. But like, what are we concretely saying we're going to do besides common planning time?
Okay, with that, I have a motion by Dr. Phillips, seconded by Ms. Patone. If there is no further discussion, Dr. Curley, would you call the roll? We can do that. All who vote yay? Yay. Any nays? Motion carries. Ms. Patone.
I just, through you, Chair Corruption, I just wanted to make a quick comment. My no vote was just about reducing the school day, not the lack of support common planning time. I think everybody knows that. And I also wanted to acknowledge what Dr. Curley said and articulated about the constraints that this joint study was working under. And I guess what I do, and from a point of reflection for me as well as for the body, I think that we really have to be incredibly thoughtful about how we define a joint study in the future. And as we're negotiating and creating contracts, would we take care to avoid backing ourselves in the corner, which I felt like I kind of was in this one time for myself, and apply that learning as we do our next negotiation to be more, not more thoughtful, but do the best we can to look at the crystal ball, even though I know we all try to do that and how complicated the contracts are. So I just wanted to name that for myself and for the body.
And just to follow up on that, in my mind, it feels a bit just about the communication that could have been better between the district and the school committee about the fact that the contract was going to the SEU before it came to us, and sort of laying out what that process was. At least that's part of it in my mind.
That's part of it, but it's also like what we actually put in the contract. So why our definition of how we put that in the contract, and I think Dr. Curley really articulated that we created the box. And of course I'm fighting the box, and I'm feeling really uncomfortable and unhappy with the box, but it's just a learning as we move forward.
Okay, thank you for that. And with that, we have lots of other things still to discuss this evening. So thank you to the Common Planning Time team. And with that, Dr. Curley, the district report.
Thank you, Chair. If I can take an item, I guess it's the district report, so I can take an item out of business.
You may,
but
yes.
I would like to invite to the podium our Director of Data, Sam Elagine. We had one final school improvement plan memo for the West Somerville Neighborhood School, which is included in the packet tonight. And Ms. Elagine is here just to briefly highlight that memo and be available for any questions. And as a reminder, with any school improvement plan presentations or memos, our office is always available for follow-up questions. Ms. Elagine.
Thank you. I'll be very brief, but I'm very excited to say that you now have the final school improvement memo in front of you from the West Somerville School. This closes out this whole beginning of this cycle this year. We've seen presentations from half of our schools at the start of the year, from February through April, and the memos which were submitted also several weeks ago. So very excited to put this in front of you. I just want to say thank you to Principal Murphy Baker at the West Somerville for putting a lot of effort into this memo, especially as a first time and being in her interim principal role. And I think it'll definitely be a bit of a guiding light to the new principal that we'll be welcoming next year, and I look forward to looking at this plan with them and progress monitoring with this school improvement plan. And I look forward to next year's presentations as well, where we'll give you an update on how the plans are progressing and the progress towards the goals in all of the SIPs. Yes, so I won't go too deep into the details of the plan, but as Superintendent Curley mentioned, we're always here to answer any questions that you may have about this SIP or any of the other SIPs that have been presented to you so far.
Great, thank you so much for that. Are there any questions? Seeing none, thank you for being here this evening.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Sam.
hopefully the next item.
Thank you, through you, Chair. I just want to give a quick update on the FY24 budget. Last week, school committee unanimously passed the district's budget proposal with which was $100 million, just over $100 million. I can't even read this number, sorry. $100 million and $9, with a rough breakdown of $82 million for payroll and $18 million for operational management. The budget represents an 7.9% increase in the SPS budget over last year. It is, to my knowledge, the second largest increase in the district's history. The budget, as we discussed in all of our finance meetings, allowed us to reduce the number of ESSER-funded positions from 55 at the start of this year down to 29, and bring more of those positions onto the general fund before that funding expires next October. It also allowed us to increase by $2 million funding for our special education department, with a net increase in positions in that department, along with an offset of rising out-of-district costs and transportation costs. And I just want to again highlight the support from the mayor's office for making an additional $500,000 investment in out-of-school time. Obviously, that money is going to be critical next year, going to increasing access to after school and other extended learning opportunities for the district. Just want to give a shout out to our finance director, Frank Gorski, our deputy finance director, Joan White, to school committee, to Mayor Ballantyne, to everybody, educators, parents, caregivers who participated in the budget process. And thank you all for your collaboration and your feedback on the budget. We will be presenting it to City Council on June 1st in this chamber. So thanks again to everybody involved there. Couple more notes for the district update. We have only 4 weeks remaining in the school year, which means we have a lot of celebrations going on. I was just at the National Honor Society event, which was amazing. Been to a number of year-end concerts. I just want to highlight a couple of great events that are coming up. So this Wednesday is Somerville High School Scholarship Night, Wednesday, May 24th, 7 p.m. at the SHS Auditorium. Thursday's May 25th, 6:30 is the district-wide middle grade spring fling, also at the SHS Auditorium. Tuesday, May 30th at 6:30 is the SHS Chamber Music Concert in the auditorium. And then Monday, June 5th at 6 p.m. will be the Somerville High School graduation at Dilboy Stadium. And Wednesday, June 7th, is the Full Circle graduation at the Armory. Both are incredible events. Please do come out for both graduations. I also want to highlight or give a shout out to 2 of our school-based liaisons, Mary Lou Storniello at the Winter Hill and Thelma Lieto at Argenziano. They recently had the opportunity to share their work and their knowledge of working with immigrant families with students at Wellesley College. They worked with Somerville resident and lecturer Sarah Brune on highlighting the work of both of their departments in outreach and support for our immigrant and newcomer families. And so I want to shout out Mary Lou and Thelma, and I will turn it over to Mr. Mazza.
Through the chair, oh, sorry, go ahead. We good? Okay. Through the chair, huge shout out to the Somerville High School Personal Finance 1 class team of Leanne Beretsky-Jewell, Matthew Mannion, Michael Neonakis, and Oliver Wicks for an impressive showing at the 2023 Junior Achievement Stock Market Challenge held in Boston earlier this spring. The SHS foursome took the top prize in the stock market challenge with an impressive mock stock portfolio appreciation of nearly 22.86%. They also tied for second place in the Massachusetts Personal Finance Challenge, in which students can demonstrate their knowledge of earning income, spending, saving, investing, managing credit, and managing risk. And I want to note that a little later on in tonight's meeting, you will be approving this team's trip to the Federal Reserve in Cleveland, Ohio, to participate in a National Personal Finance Challenge. So we want to say congratulations and good luck to that team. We also have 2 more half-day Wednesdays scheduled for this year. This Wednesday, May 24th, is a half-day for pre-K to 8 students. Pre-K students will be dismissed at 11:30 a.m., and K to 8 students will be dismissed at noon. The next and final half-day Wednesday for students in pre-K to 8 will be June 7th. And all schools and district offices will be closed next Monday, May 29th, in observance of Memorial Day. And now our team shout-out. Tonight's behind-the-scenes shout-out goes to our special education team for their tireless commitment to meeting the diverse needs of our special education students and ensuring that we do so in the least restrictive environment. We are grateful for the very able leadership of Interim Assistant Director Will Verbitz and Assistant Director Marissa McDonald in guiding and supporting an incredibly dedicated special education team serving students across our district during a transition period over the last few months. We are excited to welcome our new Director of Special Education, Ildefonso Arellano, to this amazing team this summer and look forward to continuing to work with and support them over the coming years.
Thank you. Dr. Curley, is there more to your report?
Thank you, Chair. I just want to highlight one retirement in the personnel report. Our Human Resources Administrative Assistant, Patty DeFry, is retiring from the district after 23 years of service. And that concludes our district report.
Great, thank you. Now we have reports of subcommittees. I will entertain a motion.
Move to approve the subcommittee reports.
I have a motion by Dr. Ackman, seconded by Dr. Phillips, I believe. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all who support, say aye. Aye. Any do not support? There are none. Motion carries. All right, moving on to unfinished business. We have the resolution in support of the Thrive Act. This was something I brought forward, so I will make a motion to approve the resolution in support of the Thrive Act.
Second.
I have a motion by myself, seconded by Dr. Ackman. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all who vote aye. Aye. Are there any nays? Motion carries. Next, we have the several unfinished school policy manuals. Ms. Barish, do you want to speak to them, or shall we go straight to our motion?
I just want to remind my colleagues that file JB, file GBA, file GCF, file AC, and file ACR are essentially just updating the definition of race as per state law. File LBC is streamlining the assessment and approval of applications for private schools, streamlining that process. And then file JIB is just making, giving a little more flexibility to the way student representatives come to and participate in school committee meetings.
Thank you for that. I just have a quick question about the student involvement in decision-making. It mentions something about at least one elected representative from Full Circle, and to my knowledge, we have never had that, so I guess that's a question for the district about how we would make sure that happens in the future.
Through you, Chair, we will work with Principal Green to make sure that there is at least one representative.
Thank you for that. I will now entertain a motion on the second reading for these files.
Do you want to do the whole together or just the I was going to move to approve the ones that you mentioned were so move to approve JB, GBA, GCF, and AC, right? No, AC or ACR? Both of them, AC and ACR. I move to approve those. You want me to do it again? Yeah. Okay, I move to approve GCF, GBA, JB, I feel like I'm missing one here, ACR, and AC. Thank you.
I have a motion by Dr. Ackman, seconded by Ms. Dion. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye. Any not in favor? Motion carries. Now let's move to the other. We can take them individually if you'd like. So a motion for LBC.
I move to approve the revisions to file LBC relations with other schools and school districts.
I have a motion by Ms. Barish, seconded by Dr. Phillips. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries.
I move to approve the revisions to file JIB, student involvement in decision-making.
Second. I have a motion by Ms. Barish, seconded by Dr. Phillips. Is there any discussion? Ms. Patton.
Through you, Chair Krupchen. I just was curious, so the students just decided they wanted to have more exposure of students to the school committee as opposed to members that have more depth than what we're talking about?
Ms. Barish?
My understanding from when we met with them at that first meeting, I think in February, was that it can be challenging for the same two members to always attend because of sports commitments or homework, the way their homework ends up landing, and having a little more flexibility would be preferred.
Is there any other discussion? Yes, Dr. Phillips.
Anyway, can we make sure to get our current reps and their revised policy when we pass it?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. That brings us to new business. We already did common planning time. So that brings us to two new policies that are up for first reading. Ms. Barish?
Thank you. File KCD, public gifts to schools, essentially codifies our current practice in accordance with current law. We reviewed it with Director Gorski, who said, yes, this is what we do, this looks good. We reviewed it with Attorney Tobin, who also agreed that these were appropriate revisions. The other policy is BEDH, public comment at school committee meetings. There was a Supreme Judicial Court decision that said essentially that our current policy is too restrictive on speech and public comment, so we revised that aspect of this policy in rules. Additionally, we revised it to include district employees among those allowed to make public comment. The chair has been allowing that, but it isn't currently in our policy. And then in addition, we combined former policy BEDHE with BEDH into a single policy, just to simplify things so that people find everything in one place. MASC eliminated BEDHE from their own manual as they just decided it wasn't needed anymore.
Okay, so
folks have questions, I'm here. You can also reach out in between.
Yep, Ms. Patton.
Thank you, through you, Chair Krupchen. So for the public comment, I'm curious, so historically, the original public comment had said only residents. It was not employees. And the intention was, a lot of our recommendations or information from MASC is, about the fact that your union representation is your representative, and that, residents, because we as a body are, representing residents, that's why it was written that way. And I know Chair Green was originally part of the original policy, and I know that we had bled and changed our practice. I'm just curious about anybody's thoughts, or even his thoughts, about the original intent and sort of our role as elected officials who represent residents who vote for us, although we obviously have to consider the needs of the employees. And I hope this is not coming across as negative. I'm just being more like,
asking the question.
Asking the questions about, like, what does this expose us to? Because originally the thought was that it all should come through the union leadership.
Dr. Ackman?
I have a follow-up, I want to say comment, but I assume, I'm pretty sure it was through rules right before our colleague, Ms. Palmer, stepped off. She was running rules, and I think at the time they had reviewed it and decided to not make changes. Like, so as, I'm just saying, as recent, not just when it was first, it's not when it was originally created, it's also been revisited, and I understand it's being revisited again, but like, taking that into consideration that, it is the union is the voice of the district's employees, and that we represent the people. So.
I'll call on Ms. Barish first, because you might have some context, and then Ms. Dion.
Sure, and this is why I think this is why we put it into the revision, so that we could have this conversation. As I noted, the chair has been allowing employees to make public comment for 2 years or so now. And, maybe a way to put it in the policy is to say at the discretion of the chair, and just put it in there so that at least the level of participation that we have been experiencing with employees is codified in the policy. So that's something to consider, I guess, for the next reading.
Ms. Dion.
Yeah, I feel really strongly about district employees being able to speak. First of all, there are a lot of district employees that are non-union, as we've learned from our non-union salary study, so they can't all go through the union. And I mean, we've seen what a powerful tool it is when like 30 of them show up here and like petition us for something, and I don't think that's something that we should be in the business of limiting.
Ms. Patel?
So employees can always reach out to members in any way, shape, or form. They can email, they can call, they can try to set up lunch. It's not like there's no access. So I just want to be clear that as elected officials, I'm curious, did you guys go to MASC and kind of ask about their perspective or advice? I'm not saying we shouldn't do this. I'm more saying this is it happened during COVID because of what was going on. Right? Things were so intense and so complicated that there was sort of a kind of just a fall back and saying, okay, look, we're just going to let everybody speak. I just want us to be really intentional about this and make sure that, I don't know, have we gotten legal advice on this one? Is it something that MASC recommends, or is this something that we're just taking on to be trailblazers, which might be what we want to do, but I just want to put it out there.
Ms. Barish?
We did not discuss this with MASC or with our legal counsel, but I'm not opposed to doing that. I think it was essentially just, this is what we've been doing for 2 years. Should it be in the policy? Should it not be in the policy? Again, that's why it's here, so we can have a conversation about it.
Dr. Phillips?
Just from a practical point of view, I just don't see any way of going back. If 30 people show up to speak, I would imagine that just about every chair is going to let them speak, because that's going to de-escalate rather than escalate. And so with that in mind, I don't see why we wouldn't change the policy, again, sort of a de-escalation move, to allow whoever wants to speak, who works for the district or lives in the community, to speak.
Ms. Patone.
Thank you, through you, Chair Krupchen. I think that's a really valid point, and that's why I'm not standing here going, we shouldn't do it. I'm really just trying to be really thoughtful, because I think the thing that also is a challenge is in situations where the teachers may be in a different position than the parents. The parents are not organized. They have no access to us in an organized manner, whereas at least our teachers do. So I think what can tend to happen, and I've seen this happen, is that when the educators come in, they kind of they can cast a shadow on other voices. And so my consideration is really about how do we make sure that we get, the voices properly represented, and that we don't necessarily give an advantage to a population. So you have an organization that is organized in a way that they're already advantaged that way, which is a great thing, and collective bargaining is wonderful, but parents aren't organized that way. So I worry that it almost gives too much airtime to educators over parents. I'm particularly concerned about issues where there's difference of opinion between educators and parents. So that could be really challenging. So I'm just putting these ideas out there for people to consider. I'd like to make a request to, whether it's through you, Chair, to Ms. Barish to follow up with legal and with MASC to get a recommendation about what other districts do. Thank you.
Ms. Dion?
To follow up, obviously parents aren't organized in the sense of, with a capital O, organized labor, but we've definitely had organized with a lowercase o parent groups coming in here too. We've had the Safe Schools Somerville group, CPAC, so I feel like there are, when the situation calls for it, there are also organized parent groups in my view.
Okay. Is there any further discussion? If not, Ms. Barish, are you okay to double check with our council?
I will seek feedback from our attorneys and from MASC.
Thank you very much, and this will be on our agenda for our next meeting. Ms. Patone?
I'm curious, is Chair Green still on the line? Does he want to?
He is not.
Okay, so because I'd love to hear, because he was part of the original designation, and so anyway,
and
thank
I can't speak for him, but I'm sure he'll be happy to discuss
I'm
it
sure
at
he'll
our
be very
next
happy.
meeting.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, with that, this brings us to field trips. I will entertain a motion.
I move to approve the field trip from June 4th to June 5th, 2023 to send 4 students from Somerville High School to the Federal Reserve in Cleveland, Ohio to compete in a National Personal Finance Challenge, traveling by airplane at a student cost of $0.
Second.
I have a motion by Ms. Dion, seconded by Dr. Ackman. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Have a great trip. I have acceptance of grants. I will entertain a motion.
I move to accept all federal entitlement and continuation grants and all state continuation grants awarded to the Somerville Public Schools listed below. Private grant from Mass Cultural Council of $22,000 for the El Sistema program.
Second.
I have a motion by Ms. Barish, seconded by Ms. Dion. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. That brings us to items from board members.
Oh, there's a gift.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. I will entertain a motion for the gift.
I move to accept with gratitude the following donation. 3 gift cards from Market Basket in Somerville in the amount of $750 for the AFAS Gay Straight Alliance Club.
Second.
I have a motion by Ms. Barish, seconded by Ms. Dion. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Market Basket. And now that brings us to items from committee members. Dr. Ackman.
Thank you. In today's MASC updates, if my colleagues don't get them, I highly recommend them. I learned that Salem, where our soon-to-be superintendent comes from, has an artist in residency in the district, and I would love to plant the seed for it to be a consideration for us, especially as we bring in Dr. Carmona, to have an artist in residency for Somerville.
And this also relates to what Mr. Mazza was saying when talking about out-of-school time. So I think that's a great idea for consideration. Ms. Patel?
Thank you, Chair Krupchen, through you. I would like to make a request to the superintendent to report out on the scope of structural changes and how those get made in schools. So as many of us have heard, the Healy School, the principal, in collaboration with educators, made what I would call a significant structural change to the school to eliminate looping from there, which is, having the same teacher for 2 years, first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth. And that was never introduced to the parents. It was never introduced to ed programs. It was never introduced to the school committee body. I'm not saying we have authority over these things, but the district has been fantastic about previewing a lot of these items, sort of what I would call structural or significant changes with the school committee, knowing that they have the full authority to make those decisions, but to give us the courtesy to hear about them. So I would like to hear a follow-up on, maybe not necessarily, it could be about that specific situation or just in general, about what is a reasonable expectation from the school committee or from parents in terms of significant structural changes.
Thank you. Are there any other items? So I have one. It's kind of a fun one. A couple of months ago, we passed a resolution in support of the delegation that went to El Salvador, and I went on Saturday to their presentation where they showed slides and talked about their trip and all that, and it was great and exciting. And they presented me with a photograph. It's Sarah Davila and Nancy Mejia Smith from our district, with the mayor of the town in El Salvador they went to, presenting the resolution that we wrote in support of the delegation. So I just wanted to share this all with you. And there were students from Cambridge that went on their trip. So of course we talked about what this could look like in the future with students from Somerville. So stay tuned for that, and I look forward to hearing more about them, about what this delegation will do in the future. And if there are no other items, there are no condolences this evening. So with that, we are adjourned. Have a good night, everyone.